It was just like any other day after school. I was sitting at my desk organizing papers that needed to be graded and entered into the computer when a student came in holding a bunch of papers. She was clearly upset and shared that another student of mine had ripped up a copy of the Book of Mormon and had scattered its pages throughout the school and back parking lot. I was stunned. Both of these students were in my comparative world religions class. How did this happen? I thanked the student for collecting as much of the sacred text as she could and reassured her that I would handle the situation from there. I walked down to the principal's office praying that she was still in the building. She was. I shared with her what had happened. She listened. I told her I didn't know what to do, and she said she had full confidence in my ability to handle the situation. When I got home later that day, I was angry. I was mad at my student for tearing up a sacred text. I was angry at myself for clearly not doing a better job teaching my students to respect other people's beliefs. The anger quickly turned to tears, and I remember sitting on my bed and just crying. I was so frustrated and discouraged. My students were good kids. How could this have happened? I even wrote a poem about it. Let me give you a little backstory into my world religions class. Ever since the 9th grade, I have been interested in belief systems. I had a wonderful geography teacher named Martha Ball that introduced me to the major belief systems of the world. That introduction grew in college, where I took a world religions course. I knew the profound impact that understanding what others believe had on me, and I had a desire to teach a world religions class as a high school teacher. The class was approved on a state and district level. I just needed to get support from my principal. I remember being in my 3rd year of teaching and asking my principal if I could put the course on the course catalog for students to sign up for in the coming school year. His reply was, "I am not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole." I was shocked. Why wouldn't he want students to have that opportunity? Since I was still a new teacher, I didn't want to rock the boat. I said, okay, and left his office. He retired a couple of years later, and I decided to ask my new principal the same thing. She was excited about the idea and approved my request. So here I sat. This was my 1st year teaching this course, and one of the students in the course had torn up a copy of a sacred text. Clearly, I was winning. I didn't know what I was going to do. My ideas ranged from having a come to Jesus, so to speak, to just not doing anything. But at the end of the day, I knew what I needed to do. My world religions class was the last class of the day. So after lunch the following day, I rearranged all of the desks into a big circle. In the center of the circle, I had a desk with the torn up Book of Mormon. Word had gotten out about what had happened, and as my students hesitantly entered the room, I told them to sit anywhere they liked in the circle. Once the bell rang, I simply said, "We need to talk about what happened yesterday." As the class period went on, something amazing happened. The reality of what it felt like to not be part of the majority slowly came out. What it felt like to not be invited to the birthday parties because you were not Mormon, or what it felt like when a friend invited them to church things, and when they were no longer interested in going to those church things, the friendships ended. It broke my heart. As a member of that majority, I wanted to say, no, it shouldn't have been that way. But I couldn't. I felt really strongly that I had to be neutral in this conversation. One young woman of the dominant faith listened, validated, and apologized to each student not of her faith after they shared their story, their hurt, their pain. It was hard, all of it, but it was cathartic. It brought that group of students closer together. It made them more unified and empathetic. It was healing. It was powerful. I never identified the student who had ripped up the Book of Mormon. It wasn't necessary. What was necessary was the conversation. So what did I learn from that? I learned that teachers need to be brave enough to allow their students to have hard conversations. So if you're one of those brave teachers, or if you want to be one of those brave teachers, let me tell you a couple of things I have learned over the years as I have allowed students to have hard conversations. 1, you are a facilitator, not a participant. You are there to mediate the conversation, to make sure all voices are being heard, that all students feel safe. You are not there to push your own agenda or to use your own voice. 2, in order to have hard conversations, you and your room need to be a safe place, a place where all students feel safe. Black, white, Latino, gay, straight, trans. Are you hearing me? Even the ones that annoy you, all students need to feel safe. It's essential. You need to be able to not only teach dialogue skills, but model those skills in your own teaching. The one I would always model to my students is this: I hear what you're saying, but I think. The dialogue our students hear around us is divisive and often destructive. It is not centered around compromise and common ground. Students need to see and understand that you can disagree with someone and still be their classmate and friend. 4, allow students to share their story. Teach them to talk from their own personal experience and perspective. I would always remind my students to speak from the I perspective. 5, watch the clock. If your students are engaging in a hard conversation or discussion, make sure that you leave enough time to wrap up the conversation before the bell rings. What does that look like? It can be as simple as you, as the facilitator, summarizing the main discussion points that were shared during class, or it could be you're complimenting students on their discussion skills and ability to share thoughts and feelings. But there has to be some sort of wrap up. If you feel like the dialogue needs to continue, still wrap it up and tell students you are pausing it until next time. 6, follow up with research. After having a hard conversation, it can be powerful to have students do research on the topic. I always say education is power. You might be asking, why do the research after the conversation and not before? In my experience, hard conversations are often what is necessary for students to open up their hearts and minds to research. It is often because they have finally had a chance to share their story and use their voice. They are more open to then educating themselves more about something or seeing something from another viewpoint. We need to be better about teaching our students research skills. They have a computer at their fingertips, and they often find sources to support their viewpoints without finding balanced resources. Seeing things from multiple persons' viewpoints is a critical skill we need to be teaching our students. The past few months have been crazy in this world. Currently in the United States, we are dealing with a pandemic, an election, and protesting Black Lives Matter and police brutality. In addition to that, hot topic issues like immigration and climate change are always around. Do you hear me? These issues are around. I taught history for 18 years before I became an instructional support coach. AP European history, world civilizations, US history, government, American women's history, and comparative world religions. We need to teach history better. We need to teach the hard parts. We need to talk about the hard parts of our living history. It is enough to get me back into the classroom. We all have to do better. The civil rights movement needs to be more than one section in a chapter in a history book. We have to face reality. People will say, I don't want to touch blank with a 10-foot pole. My response to that is, it's time to get messy. History is messy and hard. Let's get our hands dirty.